What can we learn from Lane Kiffin about damage control? Now, here's a criminal defense lawyer's take. My name is Matt Eichelberger. I run the criminal defense practice group at Eichelberger Law Firm here in Jackson. We have decades of experience handling high profile criminal matters, often with people like doctors, lawyers, business owners, businesses themselves, politicians, elected officials who are by their very nature going to be above the fold headline anytime they're arrested and facing charges. Okay, so we have our own methods of dealing with those situations to make this as advantageous for our clients as we possibly can. And I want to talk with you about how Lane Kiffin has just broken all the rules and hurt himself up until this date with his actions there at Ole Miss. So, to give you a little bit of background, this is the 25th day of November, 2025. We might get a decision any day now, or word might leak that Lane has made his choice about where he's going to be a head football coach, either at Ole Miss, LSU, or Florida. That could come at any moment. But a few weeks back, rumors started to kind of simmer that Lane was interested in possibly taking another job at the end of this season. Now, a few weeks ago, Ole Miss was having a good football season, not necessarily one we saw coming today. It was good. It was better than expected, given the amount of players who left and went to the NFL after last season. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Well, Florida fired Billy Napier, their head coach, and immediately they set their sights on Lane Kiffin. Then LSU fired Brian Kelly and did so in a very messy, public way, but they then set their sights on Lane Kiffin. So that's nothing to do with Lane. Lane can't control what other people are saying about who they want to coach their football team, right? But then Lane started to make some mistakes, and he frankly put himself in a bad spot. It's almost like a person deciding to have too many drinks, then getting behind the wheel and, getting pulled over with blue lights behind them and getting hauled off for DUI. This is kind of happening in slower motion with Lane. So Lane decides that he is going to make a comment when asked about these other jobs. He's going to talk about it, and he says, that other jobs, perhaps you have some advantages there with stadium size and then with histories of Heisman trophies, and you're in better recruiting ground than he is at Ole Miss, right? So he talks about essentially ways in which these other jobs would, in his mind, be better than Ole Miss. So that was a mistake. Then after the Florida game, where he had the highest crowd in Mississippi history, the largest crowd in Mississippi history, he talks about how this was a great environment tonight, but he then says, "Were you here last week when we played the Citadel?" Uh, just for those of you who aren't football fans, people don't show up to games like that. This past weekend was one of those weekends where SEC teams were playing, lower tier opponents, and they weren't going to be good games. So people didn't show up for those either, no matter where they were. The Tuscaloosa, Auburn, Gainesville, Baton Rouge, didn't matter. Folks weren't showing up for those games. Just like at Ole Miss, they didn't really show up for the Citadel game either. So he chose to take that shot at the Ole Miss fan base for not showing up to one of these games that no one shows up for. So another misstep. But then came the two that I'm going to treat as one, which is flying his family to Gainesville and then to Baton Rouge in very public fashion. There was no attempt to hide tail numbers or maybe move them around, right? These were pretty identifiable from the flights themselves that these were affiliated with the University of Florida and with Louisiana State University. So big mistakes there. Shouldn't have done that. So he's done all of this to really put himself on the wrong side of his Ole Miss fan base and administration, and then frankly college football media at large, because what they see is a guy who kind of has it made, right? He gets everything he wants. He doesn't miss out on players for lack of money. The administration is out of his way. No one messes with what Lane wants there in Oxford. And he is appearing to abandon his team at the end of what is a playoff run. So, a historic year for the school. He's going to run off to a rival and try to rebuild what he already has in Oxford. Doesn't make any sense, and you're starting to see at this point in time, a little over a week ago, really the college football media turn on him pretty substantially. Lane then did the thing that people who are charged with crimes, they're in high profile situations, oftentimes tell us they want to do, right? Which is control the narrative. Lane had that impulse and he went with it. Fortunately, the people who are around him, I guess, weren't advising him very well and telling him that's a bad idea. We're going to talk about what the right idea is in a second. But so Lane decided he was going to try and take care of this himself. He was going to reshape the narrative, which again is the wrong idea. So he starts laying on social media posts about how he loves Oxford and how great Ole Miss is. Well, he's saying that, yet he's doing all these things. His actions don't follow his words, which just angers the Ole Miss fan base even more. Then he goes on the Pat McAfee show and he does something, frankly, that he should have never done, which is get behind a microphone and in front of a camera because Lane is bad on camera. He just always has been. He's not a natural there. He's much better when he can kind of take his time and come up with a wry post on social media. That's what he's good at. Being in front of a camera is certainly not his strong suit. But he goes on Pat McAfee show and he talks about how great it is to be in Oxford. And all I can say is, us lawyer folks, we've joked about this ever since about how we pray every day and have our entire careers for a witness who is as bad on the stand as Lane was on that camera. It was horrific. It was embarrassing, honestly. And it did nothing to help him. So that just did two things, really. It angered the fans and a lot of college football media. But then, number two, and this is the worst part, it kept the story alive. He's got this little fire burning. Frankly, he's the one with the matches in his hand who lit the fire. But he's got this fire burning, and then he's giving it oxygen. So he's doing the thing that is the least advantageous thing for him to do. He's hurting himself. He's self-inflicting all these wounds. Then last Friday, he had a meeting with Glenn Boyce, who's the chancellor of Ole Miss, and Keith Carter, who's the Ole Miss athletics director. And the idea was at that point they were going to have some idea as to what he's going to decide. Well, I'm not sure if they got it or not, but one thing was apparently conveyed to Lane, and I think it was probably more helpful to Lane than Lane would ever even admit to himself at this point, and that was shut up. They got him apparently to stop with the social media posts and stop giving interviews. Um, he's now letting some other people tote water for him. If you saw game day this past Saturday, Nick Saban, he shares an agent with Lane. He's been Lane's employer in the past, and I think they're friendly. Nick was the one trying to blame the situation not on Lane, but on the college football calendar and how it's different this year. And while that is certainly the environment in which this is all playing out, Nick is, I'm not sure if he's aware of this or not, but he is not fully sharing the story, which is Lane has brought this on himself. And frankly, that's what Lane tends to do. We look at his history and he brings it on himself. So you've got Nick toting water for him to try to turn the guy who is leaving his football program in the middle of a college football playoff run, try to turn him into the victim, right? So that's what Nick is doing, and that's what Lane would like to have happen. That's the strategy. Now, that said, it's the wrong approach. What should have happened is not trying to take control of the narrative. What should have happened, and is what we do 95% of the time very successfully in people that we represent, is we end the narrative. You don't control the narrative in a situation like this. You starve it of oxygen. So if someone is charged with a crime and it's splashed all across the headlines online, it's above the page on the newspaper, what we do, above the fold rather, on the front page of the newspaper, what we do is we try to end public conversation where we can. There are certain types of cases, think self-defense cases and murder cases, that sort of thing, where we do want to get our narrative out there, but almost every time the correct play is to starve it of oxygen. Unfortunately, that's not what Lane has done. So that's what we can learn. If you're ever in a situation like this and you're facing this type of scrutiny, don't feed the fire. Be quiet. get out of the public eye. Don't get on social media and post about how you've been wronged. Stop. Stop. The cycle will move on. The media will not cover this any longer because that's how this works, right? Every time you say something, it bumps back up to the top of the media cycle. A little bit of calm and quiet will make things disappear, both from the newspaper and the websites and also from the public mind. And at that point in time, you can go and take care of it quietly. Lane should have followed that model, and he didn't. If you have any questions, or if you are in a situation like this where you're dealing with criminal defense issues and need our help, go to our website, www.ike-law.com. That's ike-law.com. You can contact us on the phone number that you'll see here on the screen as well. Thanks.